Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmidty, Swanee and Clarkey visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right, how are we?
Cold by the looks of things, with people
Chilly
got
as.
and chilly willy.
It's one of those days when the sun comes out but there's no heat.
Oh.
You think, you should have just stayed in bed, son. I appreciate you making an effort, but go back to bed.
Oh.
How about you?
What are you up to, Schmidty?
Oh, well, it hasn't been too cold here, but I've been inside working hard at the office as per every other day of the week. So, yeah, no, good.
You're like a super trooper. The beams are going to blind you.
I certainly am, I tell you.
It's a bit cooler here today, but I don't know, it's changed a little bit where I thought it was cool that it was going to be, but it's actually colder in the house than it is outside. When I went outside a little earlier, it's actually quite humid. You know what I mean? There's been a bit of rain around.
When you say cool, can we put it in perspective? Are you talking like 20 degrees or something?
Yeah, probably. Oh, let me have a look. I probably will. It's 21, yeah.
I'll bring back those days.
But it's overcast, so, and it was supposed to rain a little bit. It did rain a little bit this morning, but, yeah, it's not. It's been pretty mild.
It's a scorching 12 here.
See, that is the real deal.
Feels like way less.
That was our high.
All right, so who are we? I'm Schmidty.
I'm Swanee.
And I'm Clarkey. And together we are
Trial by
Wine.
And what are we drinking?
Very exciting. Coke Zero.
Oh, Coke Zero.
Surprise, surprise.
Straight out the gates. Yep.
Don't want to add anything more to that?
No.
She does. She'd love to add some vodka to that, but she's got to do the school run after. Yeah.
Correct.
Damn that school run. Well, we're having a Feathertop 2021 Pinot Noir, which I started to have a look at, and I thought, what stands out to me about that? That's kind of like mid-COVID.
Oh.
Wow.
Drank a lot of Feathertop in 2021. I'll get it now.
Vintage.
Yeah.
Right, the date.
Vintage 2021. Yeah,
It's
correct.
a COVID vintage.
It's a bit slow. Sorry.
Yeah, mid-COVID, yeah. I wonder if I touch it, if I'll catch COVID, because it could have been.
I don't think so. I don't think that's how it works.
They were the
Do your
days when you were waiting for
research.
a parcel to come in and you were like taking it in gloves.
Glen 20, yeah.
They were the days, 2020.
Spraying myself with Glen 20 most of the time.
Yep.
I'm drinking a Damson gin. Thanks for asking.
Oh, fancy.
Lovely.
That's because now that I've moved to Sunbury and I'm recording in my old studio, otherwise known as the kitchen in the bungalow at Mum's house, I don't have any booze here anymore. I seem to have moved it all up there. So all I had was a gin, but that's fine. It's completely appropriate for right now. No. I got a bit of tonic water.
You've got mixer, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm doing the story, of course, so I've got to stay relatively
Joba.
Do you really?
I do, because, from past experience, we know that there's a tipping point and it all goes downhill very quickly.
It's kind of what I was pointing out. So,
I know,
yes.
I know. But I want to
Swanee, just in case, brace yourself. You may need to take over.
This is a pretty big story and I want to make sure that I do it justice.
Right.
So,
Let's do
without
it then.
further ado, you guys better buckle up for this one.
Oh.
As you know, I listen to true crime podcasts. You never would have guessed with the amount of
True
knowledge I
that.
have. And it was one of those that I heard this story for the first time. And it's one of those stories that you can't forget, a bit like Wiggers for you, Swanee.
Oh, you had to bring it up.
If you
Having a nice, relaxed day. Now I'm looking behind me.
Shut up, but it's such a funny trigger. Anyway, if you don't know this
That's
case,
the Wigger trigger.
it is. If you don't know this case, then I think you're unlikely to forget it in a hurry after this.
Oh, maybe if I drink a lot, then I'll forget
You
it
might
because
do,
I. Yeah.
The secret to everything.
Let's get another bottle of wine.
Rack it up. My sources are tampabay.com, Wikipedia, blurredbylines.com, allthat'sinteresting.com, ranker.com, sfgate.com, southcoasttoday.com, salon.com, and scarymummy.com. All right, so speaking of the timey-wimey machine, we're going to get in that machine and we're going back to 1978 when brown and pea green corduroy were cool. Hair was long, which isn't much different to today, and hitchhiking was a common way to get from A to B.
True that. Yes. Can we bring back the corduroy?
Oh, please, can we not?
That's a no.
I grew up in that.
It doesn't give a lot, does it? It doesn't have a lot of stretch.
No, it doesn't.
You've got to be of a certain sort of, what's the word I'm after? A certain figure to make that
Body
work.
shape, that's
Yes.
right. And that wasn't my body shape growing up
mine.
in poo green corduroy. All right, so on September 29th, 1978, a 15-year-old Mary Vincent was waiting by the side of a road in California. Her folks had gone through an acrimonious divorce, which had really done a number on Mary, and she'd run away from home with her boyfriend. They lived in
Like for real, run away from home, not,
Yeah.
I'll go down to the bottom of the driveway.
Yeah, I'm not going to wait at the bottom of the path and wait for you to call me back. No.
How old was she,
full
Schmidty?
on-
I missed that.
15.
Sorry. 15.
Yeah. So they lived in a car for a summer in Sausalito, California. But then he was arrested on charges of raping a teenage girl. And I'm not sure if that was actually
Was that
charge
her
of-
or someone
That's
else?
it. I don't know. There was nothing further on it. So whether it was statutory rape for being with Mary or another teenage girl, I'm going to assume the former. On her own, she headed to Soquel, California, where she stayed with an uncle, and then to Corona near LA to stay with her grandfather. At times, she was living on the streets and sleeping in unlocked cars in that period. So she was having a pretty rough time of it. Before the divorce, Mary had been a pretty normal teen. She'd been a competitive dancer and wanted to travel the world as a performer. On that fateful day,
Which one? The one of the
September
divorce?
29, 1978. No, the day she was waiting on the side of a road.
Right, sorry.
Mary was with some other hitchhikers waiting for a ride when a van pulled over. The driver was 50-year-old Laurence Singleton, a merchant seaman who said he was driving to Reno, Nevada, but could take someone to LA, but he told the group he could only take one person.
In a van?
And
Ding, 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 ding,
I
ding,
read
ding, ding,
somewhere
ding.
that the other hitchhikers were like, no, you can take more than us. And if you're not
Yeah,
taking all
yeah.
of us, then you're taking
We're
none
out.
of us. But she was absolutely exhausted. She'd had such a hard time. She was so overwhelmed. She just wanted to get home. So against her better judgment, Mary got into the car.
Fell for his ruse.
Got into the van, yeah.
Poor thing.
Now, Lawrence seemed friendly enough, but he had a prior conviction for contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and I don't know what that means, and had a history of alcohol
God,
abuse.
how many people could be convicted of that you'd known as you were growing up?
I've literally no idea what it means, though.
What do you have a history of? I missed that word.
Contributing to the delinquency of a minor. So could that have been like giving a young person alcohol and drugs, maybe?
Oh, or a cigarette, or,
Yeah,
you
maybe.
know.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was your question this morning?
I thought you said something. There was a word, but you kind of stuffed it up when you said it yourself.
Abuse.
But what abuse was it?
Alcohol abuse.
Alcohol abuse. Sorry, got it.
Yeah, I
Right.
said alcohol, blah, blah.
Is that, and then so I missed it.
Because I've suffered myself from a bit of alcohol, blah, blah. Yeah, no, that's what it was.
Got it.
He was also recently divorced from his second wife and was estranged from his daughter. Now, not long after accepting the ride and setting off, Mary sparked up a dart, which made her sneeze. Remember, it was 1978. Lawrence reached over to feel her neck, asking if she was ill. Now, I'm assuming it's that kind of, touch the back of your neck to see if you're running a temperature type thing. But
Not a thing. It's creepy,
right.
creepy already. Yeah.
yeah,
You're running a temperature.
strangely, Mary didn't like that, and who would, and pulled away from him. But nothing happened after that, so she fell asleep. When she woke up, it became apparent that they were driving back to Nevada, going in the opposite direction that he was supposed to be going. And, of course, jumping to the conclusion that the worst was happening, and why wouldn't you? She found a stick in the car and pointed at Lawrence, demanding he turn the car around and take her to LA. I mean, I would have said, just stop the car
Get
and
me
just
out.
get out.
Yeah, get me out.
But,
Who keeps a stick in the car?
well, he did. Let's assume it was a bit of a dirty van.
I
Yeah.
feel like that's like the third alarm bell. There's the fact that they can only have one in the van, the touching of the neck, and that stick. What is that doing?
Bit odd, I know.
Oh, you're running a temperature, doll.
I know.
Yeah. Here's a stick.
He did apologise and said, it was just an honest mistake. I'm sorry about that. And turned the car back around. And Mary thought that seemed fair. And he did seem quite sorry. So she let it go and they continued on their way. As with all long drives and podcast recording sessions, there was that point where someone needed a wee break. And in this case, it was Lawrence. They pulled over and Mary got out to stretch her legs. She noticed her shoelace was undone and bent over to tie it up. It was then that Lawrence hit her over the back of the head with either his fists or a hammer. I've read multiple versions, and she fell.
Oh.
He then tied her up and put her back in the van and tore her clothes off. He then forced his penis into her mouth and raped her vaginally, telling her not to scream or it'd kill her. When they stopped again at a canyon, he forced her orally, raped her, and sodomized her. After that, obviously she kept sort of pleading for him to set her free, but he just forced her to drink some dodgy alcohol and then she passed out. When she awoke next, she was being dragged about 50 yards from the van.
That was unfair. That happened way too quickly. That went from just a nice little story. I know, and I need to interrupt because we were kind of all lighthearted and making jokes, and then you just went boom. I just fell silent. I was like, not even a little strap yourself in.
I told you at the beginning to buckle up. I gave you fair warning.
You're evil.
So he cut her bindings. So she's on the side of the road. He cuts her bindings. He tells her to lie down on the edge of the road. And at this time, she's just begging him to let her go and let her be free. And for a moment, she thought he was actually going to. He said, "You want to be free? I'll set you free."
No.
He then cut off her left arm just below the elbow. With a hatchet, yeah. What? Mary remembers falling when this happened and grabbing him with her right arm to stay upright. And then she was extremely confused because she was falling again and her brain was telling her that she was hanging on to him. But that's because he'd also cut off her other arm under the elbow as well. So he has cut both of her arms off from, I think it's 3 or 4 inches.
How did he do
it?
It had to chop them, I guess.
Yeah, so it was one of them.
Very sharp.
One of them was, I'm assuming, pretty sharp. I tell you what, the one I've got at Ilden for kindling wouldn't go near this. But so I assume it was sharp. But it was 3 blows on one arm and 4 on the other, I believe.
Swanee, why have you still got your headphones on?
That's the worst bit, though. I got it over quick, right?
Look at me.
And I didn't get
Look at me, just look at me.
Schmidty, I'm going to get you next time I see you for that.
Excuse me, Red Ripper. That's all I got to say to you.
I don't know. At least he took us. What are you about? Like 2 minutes in, and you're in there, and you're chopping limbs off. I'm like,
Oh, no.
Excuse me. That was it, right? That was quick. Quick, and I did it. I wasn't painless. I did it. Ripped the Band-Aid off. But him, 5 hours of it, like Chinese water torture.
I know it's not about me, but I feel sick.
Okay.
That poor girl. She was, 15 there?
2 minutes into this podcast. I don't know where else we could go.
Can we go and have a drink in a separate room, Swanee?
That's what makes this a really interesting story, though, or a good
We
story.
might need another bottle of red at this rate.
I think, Schmidty, you should go and continue with this podcast
record
by
on my own.
yourself.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and we'll go and have a recovery drink.
Well, she is quoted as saying, "I felt all the pain, the sharpness and burning, and as the blood was leaking out of my body, I felt the hot ooze just flowing out of me. I felt
so she
everything
survived as well.
I was aware
she's
of
had to because she's getting.
Otherwise, Schmidty's got a good Ouija board.
Yeah.
She survived. Lawrence then shoved her down a 9-metre embankment, so they're on the edge of a canyon.
He said, "Oh my Lord."
Following her down, he stuffed her into a concrete pipe and said, "Okay, now you're free."
What?
Oh my God.
Assuming that
I'm
she
sorry,
would
this is
die.
going to make me have nightmares.
Yeah, it's a big concrete pipe though, Carly. Like
Oh,
one of
thank
those-
you. Okay.
Not, when I say
Like
stuffed, he's
like a
tried to hide
drainage
the
one.
body, like a big
drainage one,
drainage
okay.
pipe.
Question:
I just want.
Yeah.
Is it pipe lying down? Is it one of those massive drain pipes, or is it standing up and she won't be able to climb out?
I would say it's a drainage pipe because it's under the road. So there's a steep
Right.
embankment she's
Yep,
gone down.
like a
I'd say
culvert,
somewhere
yeah.
down it is a culvert, right? So he's thrown her into that and he's pushed her into the pipe, right? It is exactly.
I just want to know if everyone else heard Schmidty say that was it, and then continue on in a similar fashion. Am I going crazy, or is it far out, lady?
You were threatening to leave the room. I had to keep you in.
I'm starting to be concerned about like the wiring of my brain. Starting to listen to the last couple of weeks have been. Oh my word!
This
It's
is
a
an
lot.
interesting case because there's a lot of good. Not like Mary suffers a lot, but a lot of good comes out of this as
Great.
well. So it's
Okay,
one of those
good.
sort
I
of
need it,
terrible
thank you.
moments, but also
Yeah.
triumphant. Okay,
Yes,
so
okay.
just stick with it.
If any of our listeners do think that Schmidty needs a Chinese burn next time I see her, where should they email Schmidty?
Trybywine@gmail.com.
I'm not sure that a Chinese burn, given the I don't say
The
crime,
kind of injuries.
given just what's
Injury.
happened.
Clark is really good at being inadvertently inappropriate, isn't he?
Yes. You clearly didn't think about that, did you, Paul?
Why would I? Ouch. Right. Well, if they would like to come up with their own trial by wine sentence for Schmidty next time I see her, where do they email?
I've never heard you say Chinese burns. I was like, is he No.
tryby1@gmail.com. No, he has said it before. Very
yes,
early,
okay.
very
Chinese
early.
burn.
Yeah, Chinese burn. Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, and if anyone would like to punish Clarkie for the Red Ripper, then go right ahead too. So he's put her in this pipe in the culvert, and because he's assumed that she would die soon enough, and he took off. And they think that he cut her arms off to avoid her being easily identified.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, however, Laurence Singleton did not know the kind of young woman he had attacked. Mary
Go
didn't
Mary.
die. That's right. When she woke, she knew she was in real serious trouble.
So she hadn't bled out already.
She was bleeding profusely from the 2 arm wounds, naked, alone, and at the bottom of a ravine.
Having just been raped and sodomized.
Oh, yeah, I don't even want to. Yeah.
Oh.
In an extraordinary feat of survival, Mary stuffed mud into her wounds to stem the bleeding and dragged herself up the ravine and onto the road. She then walked 3 miles out of the culvert she had been dumped in, which was Del Porto Canyon, with her arms raised to stem the bleeding. I mean, the presence of mind. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to misquote this, but she said something along the lines of, I held my arms up to stop the blood and muscles falling out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's extraordinary, isn't it? And I also read somewhere else, I haven't got the exact quote, but when she woke up, she knew she was in a really bad way and she knew she could die. And there was just this voice in her head saying, he's going to do it to other people. You have to survive. He's going to do it again. So that was part of kind of what drove her out, drove her to keep moving. Yeah, she is an absolutely extraordinary woman. So following the sound of the freeway till she reached it, Mary tried to flag down the first car she saw.
Oh, God, could you imagine seeing that?
Well, I think it was Clarkie
It'd
and
be
Wu.
terrifying.
I seem to recall it was a red convertible. And
she flagged us down on her way to a winery.
On your way to a winery. And
could you imagine if that happened?
You got the shit out of there because it was like something out of a nightmare had just arrived on the side of the road. So they drove off. They were terrified.
Terrified,
Too shocked, yeah.
Did they really?
Yeah, they did. I'm not saying you guys did. It just was a red convertible. But, yeah, no, they booked it. They just shut themselves, basically.
Did they call the police?
They shut themselves.
Oh,
well, I mean, I'm not saying
the side of it
at all, but just imagine.
Yeah, it would have been terrifying in the middle of it.
A woman naked, covered in blood and mud.
Arms.
Yeah, God forbid you'd want to help her.
I mean,
no, but you wouldn't know. I can kind of understand.
It's
It would be
almost
terrifying.
is that a real thing or is that a ghost? What am I looking at?
I would agree with that. I think it'd be too in the middle of
night.
night.
I think they just went, not today.
No.
They'd be terrified.
They were frightened.
But they should have. I would have been. I would have called the police.
Done something, but they were frightened. Yeah. Anyway, fortunately, a second
someone
couple
with more balls turned up.
Yeah, second couple who were on a holiday and apparently were kind of driving around a bit lost stopped to help her. They wrapped her up in the towels and that they had in their car, and they drove her to a nearby airport where they called an ambulance because I'm figuring in 1978, the area, there wasn't much around, so that was the nearest place to get to a phone because you didn't have mobiles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mary was able to give an incredibly detailed description of Laurence, which meant they could do a police sketch that was so accurate that people immediately recognised him.
Are you serious?
So Mary.
She's incredible.
Nuts for Mary.
She did go on to recover physically from the ordeal after spending over a month in hospital and was fitted with prosthetic arms and eventually returned to school. And I read somewhere else that she went to a specialised school because at this point she was handicapped. And the prosthetic arms had hooks on either end of them. And so if you look at images of her, she actually has hooks on her arms. And she's unbelievable in the way that she uses them. You know, she did work really hard to adapt to that quite quickly. Unfortunately, though, in order to save her right arm, they had to take some of her parts of her leg. And so her dreams of she's still got her legs, but they had to use a bit like a bone graft or something. And it meant that she wouldn't be able to dance professionally after that because she had these dreams of being
or something.
It would have been something, but it would have weakened the leg, which meant that she wasn't able to continue with her dreams of being a dancer. She, of her own talent, said, "I'd have been a lead dancer at the Lido de Paris in Las Vegas," she said in 1997. Then Hawaii and Australia. I'm serious. I was really good on my feet. But when this happened, they had to take some parts out of my leg just to save my right arm. So that was also, another whammy for her. The police arrested Laurence and Mary, who was absolutely terrified, testified against him. Laurence denied doing anything wrong and accused Mary of being a sex worker, calling her a $10 a night whore. So I guess it makes it okay to cut her arms off. We spoke last week about men who hate women, and I'm absolutely sure Laurence falls into that category. He also made up a story that there were others in the van. He said that he'd picked up 2 male hitchhikers, Larry, imaginative, isn't it? His name's Laurence. He's using his own name.
Yeah.
And Pedro. He said they stopped at a bar, bought some dope, smoked the dope and drank, stopped in a canyon, and then paid for sex with Mary. He said he passed out and woke to find Larry driving the van towards San Francisco. Mary's clothes were in the van, but she was gone. Larry told Laurence Mary had her hands in the till and was sent to Los Angeles. I don't even know what that means.
What?
Laurence then left the 2 hitchhikers in San Francisco. It's feasible, yeah? Yeah. Sure.
No, that's a no from me.
Despite having to face this complete bag of dicks, Mary testified and only referred to him as my attacker and not by his name. And that reminded me of Jacinda Ardern, who famously wouldn't name the guy who went on that rampage and murdered 51 people in 40 more in Christchurch.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, that works so well, I don't know that guy's name. So good on her.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, neither do I.
Mary was firm in insisting that he did this, as in cut her arms off. And she said that in that she said, he did this. He did this in the trial. And October 1978, the Stanislaus County Grand Jury returned an indictment charging Laurence with Count 1, forcible rape, Count 2, forcible oral copulation, Count 3, kidnapping, Count 4, sodom, Count 5, forcible oral copulation, Count 6, mayhem, Count 7, attempted murder. The indictment also...
Is that for the arms?
It's not like the other one. Mayhem?
Mayhem is worse than it sounds. We've talked about mayhem before.
Like
I think it's acting in a way that is intended to hurt someone. No, mayhem. There is a technical definition of mayhem in legal terms.
It's not
because it just doesn't sound like
it's not
it
just having
there.
shits and giggles and going a bit
cray.
No, it's not just cray. I'm up for some mayhem.
No, it's not having a stick in the back of your van.
That was wild.
I think it's something to do with intentionally hurting someone or having intention to hurt someone.
So Stuart's just Googled it. It says violent or extreme disorder, chaos as a definition, and then law, the crime of maliciously injuring or maiming someone originally so as to render them defenceless.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's the arms.
Wow.
Yeah.
What?
That's good to know.
Mayhem go from that to our current day content?
I think we use the word quite frivolously.
Yeah, it's mayhem. Yeah. The next time someone says it was mayhem, the 3 of us will be like,
"Oh, I hope not."
Bit of side eye, a bit uncomfortable. What do you mean?
Who was maimed to the point where they're defenceless?
That's
it was mayhem. I'm like, I'm sure it wasn't. You're talking about school pickup or something.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, it was mayhem.
Yeah, could you research that and come back to me, because
I think you'll find it probably wasn't.
Stretcher.
The indictment also alleged that Laurence used a deadly weapon in committing the offences charged in counts 3, 6 and 7.
Yeah, I don't know which 3, 6 and 7 were, but he definitely used a deadly weapon.
Mayhem, attempted murder and kidnapping.
Right.
And inflicted great bodily injury in committing the offences. And I think we can all agree with that. His defence tried to argue that he was drunk and therefore had limited capacity. They also tried to say he was a mentally disordered sex offender. But that didn't hold, as he had no priors for sex offence. He had only a history of violence caused by alcohol intoxication. Now, if you are wondering why I went into the detail of the charges and specified the types of assaults against Mary, as instead of saying she was raped and bad things happened.
Okay, yeah.
It was relevant for this next contention by the defence, which really got me. Taken from caselaw.findlaw.com, Laurence's third contention in the sentences imposed on counts 2 and 5, oral copulation, are improper double punishment in contravention of section 654. On this point, Laurence appears to argue the acts of oral copulation were used as a means of committing the ensuing rapes and sodomy and were not independent separate crimes. He asserts the inference to be drawn from the evidence is that the oral copulations were not achieved to achieve a separate sexual gratification, but to achieve erection so that the rapes and sodomy could be committed.
That's like a necrophiliac saying I had to murder them so I could have sex with them. Like
the Red Ripper saying I had to do all this horrible violence to someone to be able to ejaculate. It should all be wrapped up in one thing because it was all in order to do something. It wasn't multiple different things.
And somebody allows them to argue that.
I know, really?
Yeah. Anyway, don't worry. It didn't get it. didn't get away with it. Finally,
Well played.
Don't worry.
well, you're getting
fret.
really
All
angry,
right.
and I want you to, calm down.
Move on.
Finally, they argued that he was improperly sentenced under Section 664 and 187 for attempted murder rather than for the more specific offence of assault with intent to commit murder under Section 217, providing for a lesser penalty. So, you charged him on the wrong thing, so he should get, less time. It's just, let's face it, the defence are, in my mind, desperately trying to just lesser and get us away from possibly the death penalty here, I think.
So first up didn't do it. Then, I did some of them, but those ones don't count because I needed to do them to do that. And then, no, you've got the wrong charge. It wasn't that bad.
Worse yet. It's not even I didn't do that. It's like it doesn't matter that I did that because she was a whore. She asked for it.
Well, kind of. But first up he was saying that he fell asleep and it was Larry and Pedro.
Complete fabrication. Yeah, fabrication.
Yeah, that's what I mean
He's
by
the
he didn't
other
do it. It was a person with the same name as mine and the Hispanic one. They're the ones who did it.
Oh, don't even, yeah.
Well, no, but...
No, I know, but everything... I think Carla just jumped at that horrible noise you made.
Oh, sorry, that was my cat fur balling.
I know, it's disgusting.
Just stop it.
As Mary left, here's the worst bit. Get ready for it.
Oh.
Well, it's not the worst bit in violence. It's just really creepy.
Yeah.
As Mary left the courtroom, Laurence said something to her, which he later admitted was, "I'll finish this job if it takes me the rest of my life."
He didn't.
He did. Oh, my
What did she say?
God.
Will not.
She did nothing. She ran for the hills, the poor darling. In April
That
19...
is just...
Awful. I know. He's a monster.
mental trauma as well. More mental trauma.
Well, she's already got enough of that, yeah.
Yeah.
In April 1979, Laurence was found guilty and sentenced to a total of 14 and 1/3 years in prison as follows. Count 7, attempted murder, 10 years, including 6 years for the offence, 1 year for the use of a weapon, and 3 years for the infliction of great bodily injury.
Hang on a minute. Are you expecting Swanee to do the math on this, or are you going to give us a total figure at the end?
It was 14. The total is 14 years.
Too many numbers already.
I'm already like...
Count 1, rape, 1 and 1/3 consecutively.
What?
Count
1 and 1/3?
Year.
Yeah, years.
1 year for raping.
What?
Does that count? Yeah.
Why
And
so
1/3?
Consecutively.
little?
Because at the time, the California law had incredibly lenient sentences for sexual offences.
Okay.
Because women shouldn't be asking for it.
Because women is hoes, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
She was a sex worker. Don't worry about it.
Well, it didn't kill her.
Yeah,
It's only rape.
I know he tried, but, it's only rape.
Some people.
Disgusting human.
You know I'm being sarcastic when I say that.
Of course. Yeah.
That's the abhorrent kind of thinking.
Next they'll want to be treated like humans. I mean,
Or at least
far out.
equals, I know.
The outrage.
Counts 2 and 5, oral copulation, consecutive terms of 1 year each. Count 4, sodomy, a consecutive term of 1 year. Oh, I would like someone to have a few more years for putting something up my bottom without my permission, let alone my vajayjay.
They're consecutive with the 10 years, so none of these are adding on to the 10 years. Is that right?
I don't know. It's confusing. Maybe. Sentences
Swanee, can
imposed
you
on
help us
count
with that math?
6 mayhem and count 3 kidnapping was stayed pending completion of the sentences on the other court. There you go. You're right. That's all done together, but when that's finished, then you get the sentences for mayhem, kidnapping, and those two. Yeah, mayhem and kidnapping.
I don't think I've ever had cause to ask this before, but you know how he raped her more than once? Does
Correct.
he get
So
the 1 year
twice.
for each time he raped her? Because you know how you were very clear how he did it and then they went somewhere else and did it again? Is it just an overall, here's your rape
Portion of it.
penalty, versus that rape and that rape?
Yeah, he gets a year for rape, then he gets
Overall rape, just
Yeah.
you could
year
have
and
done
1/3. Year and
You should have
1/3
done it a
for
few
rape.
more times while you're at it because you're only going to get a year anyway. Yeah.
And then with the
What a
oral
wasted opportunity on
copulation,
your
he gets
behalf,
a
mate.
year for that.
How
too.
disgusting.
Sodomy
And so-
gets another year.
Yeah, and they're all on top of the 10 then.
Yeah.
Are we saying,
No,
or-
listen.
No, that's
Count 7, attempted murder, 10 years, including 6 years for the actual attempted murder, and then all the rapes and sexual stuff is added up to
Right.
the extra 4, right? So that's 10 years.
This should be a year 12 maths problem.
Oh, I know, you're not wrong.
None of that, if I was on the train heading north at 60 k's an hour,
Lawrence
terrible.
rapes Mary
No.
twice,
3
but is
times.
only 3 times,
Penalised
but is only given a 1-year sentence. Does that mean
And the third,
It's so bad because that's saying that
served
rape
concurrently.
is a generic theme as opposed to all the different instances
that
of
she
him
went
actually
through.
doing it.
That's right,
and
Yeah.
they were clearly, there was 1, there was 2, there was 3, there was this, there was that.
Yep.
It's like, oh no, we'll give you the generic 1 year. You get a year.
Yep.
You could have raped her 6 times. It's revolting.
It is.
Terrible.
It is. The mayhem and kidnapping was stayed pending completion of the other 10, so that added up to 4 and something years. Then he was credited with 225 days calculated upon 193 actual days credit. So that's the amount of time
He deserves no credit. I'm not
the amount of
crediting
time
him.
he spent in jail already.
No credit, mate. Sorry. You're in debt.
Time served. Fuck
And as
off.
I said, really, really short for what he did. In court today, he would have received 14 to life for each charge. So the law has changed since this.
Wow.
The presiding judge remarked that if he had the power, he would have sentenced him to the term of his natural life.
Yep.
Good on him.
Unfortunately,
Even
he
back
couldn't.
then, he would have.
Oh, yeah. No, that was the judge who had to sentence him to the maximum he could give him.
At the time.
Yeah,
at the time.
he gave him the maximum.
As I said, on a big plus, as a direct result of this case and the fact that he got off so light, the Singleton Bill was drafted, which stops the early release of perpetrators who commit a crime involving torture, and the minimum sentence of a crime involving torture is now 25 years. Meanwhile, unsurprisingly, the trial and Lawrence's comment to Mary had an appalling effect on her. She struggled with her family and felt isolated at school. As soon as she graduated, she moved away from home, becoming reclusive and not advising anyone where she lived, most likely to avoid him finding her. She was terrified of him finding her and killing her. She later said that her family had pretty much gave up on her, treating her like she'd died because she no longer had arms.
Oh.
Mary struggled with depression, developing an eating disorder, which, usually comes from a need for control. Didn't want to leave her house. Most of her relationships fell apart, and she even considered suicide. But I think it's a testament to the incredible strength Mary has that she didn't go through with that either. She moved to Washington State, where she had a child, Luke, to a man she doesn't talk about. And then she married a landscaper named Mr. Matthew. I couldn't really get his first name either. This was about 10 years after the attack. Now, as you guys know, having attended my wedding, there are a few odd moments that make it memorable more than perfect. But thankfully, I didn't have this experience. On her wedding day, one of her guests thought it appropriate to tell her that Laurence Singleton had just been released from jail.
No, they didn't.
Lord.
Having spent 8 years behind bars of the 14-year, 4-month sentence. Mm-hmm.
She really needs to have had a look at that guest list.
Oh.
The problem is, Swanee, as you
my
would know,
God.
I'm sure we've discussed this, but, sometimes after you've sent the invites, you can't take them back,
No, it's true.
So then sometimes you think, oh, well.
Oh, poor thing.
And, of course, he got released for good behaviour.
Did he find God?
It's the JCs.
No, I don't think so. Interestingly, psychologists from San Quentin, where he spent his time, reported he was a paranoid personality, severe schizoid, and capable of angry and destructive outbursts on those weaker than he. They did not recommend that he was let out, so it was a good decision.
Who did?
Parole board. Of course, that news that he was out had a really profound impact on not just the wedding day, but her marriage. Her husband came from a more sheltered background. Mary said the worst thing he'd ever experienced was a scab on his knee. Unable to cope with the fear of a psycho possibly stalking Mary and her family, he left after the birth of their son, Alan. And I read that she actually, I think, gave Alan to him to raise because she felt that he'd be safer with his father.
Away from her.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure about Luke, whether or not he was already with someone else. I couldn't find anything about. She later ends up with her children, but at this point in time,
I presume she
I'm not
gets
sure
no
about
help
everything.
either, because the help would suggest that he should still
just
be
about to go
inside,
on to
right?
that.
Yeah.
So if they're saying he's rehabilitated, then she shouldn't get any support because she shouldn't need it, right?
Well, she couldn't. Well, she was also pretty disabled as a result of this.
Yeah.
This injury, but she couldn't work, received very little welfare support, and of course those prosthetics and that kind of stuff on the American healthcare system was incredibly expensive, so she couldn't actually afford to get them refitted or anything. So things were bad. She
No
ended
victims of crime fund or whatever that would pay for that?
nothing for her, no.
Wow.
She ended up living in an abandoned gas station near Tacoma.
Oh.
Her lodgings weren't the best with no electricity, and I'm guessing it was a bit humid because her arms literally rusted.
Oh.
Terrified that Laurence would find her and finish the job, she lived in hiding. kept herself away from everyone, suffered the effects of the trauma and just trying to survive. She developed, I've already said she had an eating disorder. It took years for her to get over that. With Laurence out of jail, she couldn't for 1 minute drop her guard and feel safe. The night terrors plaguing her so much that she actually talked about how she broke her own ribs once because she jolted awake so hard. I just can't even imagine it. I mean,
Jeepers.
What the?
but enough about Mary. What about Laurence and his newfound freedom? Now,
You're going to really wind us up now, aren't you?
Oh, no.
it was going so well.
It wasn't. It was a gut punch. It was a punch in the nuts early on, and I thought, this has all been revealed very quickly. What has Schmidty got in her bag of tricks? And it's not really a bag of dicks.
Whilst Laurence was technically free on parole, the local community absolutely revolted at his being released.
Yes.
Probably due with the abject horror of the crime and the young age of his victim, absolutely nobody wanted him living in their community.
Where was he?
At this point, he was in San Quentin.
Did you say probably due to that?
Yeah,
Or,
it was sort of a joke.
I feel like we can all agree that it was due to that.
Yeah. According to Time magazine, as authorities attempted to settle him in one Bay Area town after another, angry crowds and Tampa's chapter of the Guardian Angels led protests, screamed, picketed, and eventually prevailed. In Rodeo,
Brilliant.
about 25 miles northeast of San Francisco, a crowd of approximately 500 local protesters forced officers to move him under armed guard from a hotel room. Authorities tried housing him across the street from Concord City Hall, but that was met with protests and failed too. He was removed from one apartment in Contra Costa County in a bulletproof vest after 400 residents surrounded the building to protest a decision to place him there permanently.
Just want to know, so the police are protecting him but not her.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, they're just trying to resettle him after leaving prison, correct?
Also protecting him while she lives next to a service station. Who should we be protecting here?
I know. She's been abandoned. Yeah.
We have a strange sense of obligation where we go, we've got to protect the criminal and give them a safe place to be rehomed whilst the victim is just absolutely left to her own devices. Just wanted to point that out. That's what's going on in my head at the moment.
Now, I don't know how to say this, but Governor George Deukmejian, does anyone know who he is? Governor George Deukmejian ordered that Laurence be placed in a trailer on the grounds of San Quentin for the duration of his 1 year parole. So he literally had to live in a caravan on the grounds of the prison because no one would have him.
Brilliant.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know why you didn't know how to tell us.
Trailer even.
But taxpayer money.
She didn't know how to pronounce his name.
But I thought it was that, but I was like, I don't know how to tell you this. I was like,
No, it was just the guy's name.
I know, it was pronunciation. I know, I was just being facetious. Yeah.
I like it.
And at the end of the 1 year term, did they also buy him a car so we could tow that trailer around fucking
probably.
Go tours from one prison ground,
So
like they're like camping grounds.
move home.
It's like the grey nomad. It's like the criminal nomad. You just go from one prison to another and park on their front lawn for security.
No, but they did have him on a curfew and they did have him being monitored by a guard. So there was still cost to the state to make sure that he was there. And all right, yeah.
I'd be happy with the mob getting him.
Well, that's not how we work.
And that money going to her.
So whilst living in the trailer in San Quentin, he didn't find God, but he did join Alcoholics Anonymous and claimed to have become sober.
Don't care.
Clearly it wasn't enough to brutally rape and then cut the arms off Mary.
Oh.
He also decided to sue her.
Are you serious?
We sometimes use the term victim blaming, and old mate Laurence was the absolute master of it. At no point did he ever see himself as the bad guy. He alleged that she had threatened him with a stick and said she would tell people that he'd raped her. Of course, this totally justified him becoming violent.
And
in his
chopping her
own
arms
words,
off.
everything I did was
And the
for
stick
survival.
was in his van anyway, so I knew that was a problem.
Everything I did was for survival, he wrote in a letter to Amanda Spake, a journalist who interviewed him. He was the victim here, and just in case you thought he had a penchant for killing prostitutes and hating on sex workers, oh no, sailors are never hostile to prostitutes. Also in the letter to Amanda.
Said no one ever.
Said a murderous sailor. He tried to sue Mary for forcible kidnap for the purposes of robbery. Bringing this case against her upset him. He said he felt sorry for her and he almost threw up 3 times and couldn't sleep after filing the complaint.
Wah, wah, wah.
Poor Laurence.
Poor bugger.
He couldn't sleep. He couldn't sleep.
He sounds like Cigarette Sally.
Yeah. No one was having a bar of this absolute codswallop, and the courts dismissed it. Good. Right before Lawrence's parole ended, Donald Stahl, the Stanislaus County prosecutor at Lawrence's trial, said, "I think if anything, he's worse now. He's not taken responsibility. He lives in a bizarre fantasy land and acquits himself each day. He doesn't accept his guilt and won't resolve never to do it again." I love a good double negative. Sadly, he couldn't stay in that trailer on the grounds of San Quentin forever. So after his parole was up and he was fully released from prison, Laurence went home to Florida.
I heard you say Tampa before. I wondered where Florida was going to come into it.
Yes.
In 1990, he was arrested for petty theft but served a fraction of a 2-year sentence. We don't hear much about him for a while there, but then he
Petty
settles...
theft, you get that, radio. And I just think about what that really
Just
translates
another
to.
repeat offence, right?
A little petty theft versus raping someone and whatever else, and he's still only got a year and a third or whatever else for that at that time.
Yeah.
True, actually,
Awful.
yeah.
Petty theft. Oh, but
Yeah, that candy bar was worth more than
yeah.
a person's, ongoing everything. Anyway, he settled in Orient Park, East Tampa. His neighbours and friends knew that he'd had trouble with the law, but they all believed good old Bill, which was what he was calling himself, who was 69 at the time, when he said he'd been framed for a rape, in California. Those Californians.
It's crazy. And I didn't mention that I'd chopped her arms off.
No, he did. As my next line, he neglected to tell them he'd cut her arms off too and left her for dead.
Yeah, he gives it just enough to be, there's a problem. If you want to think it's me, you're giving them enough to sort of work with it, and they're like, he's being open about it. He's telling us that.
He's told us. That's right.
He's
He
not
must
trying
have
to
been-
hide it.
Yeah.
He must have been set up. If you really did it, you'd hide it.
He kept a meticulously clean house. So I read something about his brother had given him an old barracks, and he'd done the whole thing up. And he went bowling with his buddies, and he was really good with his
lovely.
garden, and he just seemed like a nice old man. On February the 1st, 1997, Laurence tried to kill himself in front of the whole neighbourhood.
Brilliant.
He attached a dryer hose to his van exhaust pipe and took a nap in the vehicle. A local couple saved his life.
Who saved him?
A nice local couple thinking they would do the right thing. And he ended up in psychiatric care. His family wanted him committed under the state's Barker Act, and whilst 2 psychiatrists signed a statement...
Barker Act?
That's what it's called. It's an...
Sounds like that's what you
Named after
charge
somebody.
dogs with.
It'll be named after some case where someone proves that the family should be allowed to get someone committed.
Okay, because they don't like them.
Yep.
No, because they're a risk to themselves and everyone else.
Ah, right.
They did sign it off, and the psychiatrist signed a statement saying that he posed a real and present threat of substantial harm to his well-being. And there was a court hearing set for the 13th of February, but he signed himself out of the hospital on the 10th of February, as without the court order they couldn't stop him. And for whatever reason, the court hearing was cancelled. So that court hearing, which was meant to be the 13th of Feb, was cancelled. He signed himself out of the psychiatric care and the psychiatric hospital on the 10th of February.
What year's that?
1997.
Well, they probably cancelled it because he wasn't in psychiatric care anymore. So it
Quite
doesn't
possibly,
apply.
yeah, quite possibly.
What?
I'm not sure if it doesn't apply, but yeah, okay. On February the 19th, 1997, 9 days after he'd signed himself out of psychiatric care, Laurence was feeling blue. Hitting the bottle and other substances, he decided that some time spent with a lady of the night would be a good idea. He picked up Roxanne Hayes, a beautiful 31-year-old mother of 3, from her regular hangout on East Hillsborough Avenue. He said at the time that although she was normally a lovely person, on that day she complained about the high price of cocaine.
So he knew her from before. He's used her before. Yeah.
Sadly, Roxanne was addicted to drugs, and due to a series of previous arrests, she found it hard to get tax-paying work. So to provide for her family, she was a sex worker. And as you say, exactly. As Laurence said, she was normally a lovely person, so we do need to assume that they'd met before, which may explain why she went back to his house, which she didn't normally do.
When you say normally a lovely person, other than when she was a prostitute,
No,
is
just
that
on
what he
this
means?
day. She was a bit off on this day because she was bitching about the cost of cocaine.
Okay.
I was just saying that he's spoken as though he's known her before, he's seen her before. She's normally lovely, but she was bitchy on this day. So there's evidence that they've known each other before. Later that day, a painter who had done some work at Lawrence's dropped by unannounced, intending to touch up a few bits, when he saw Laurence viciously beating Roxanne through the lounge room window. Horrified, he watched Laurence seeming to punch her repeatedly and ran off to call 911. By the time the police arrived 34 minutes later, Roxanne had been stabbed 7 times and was dead.
Oh.
And I did read that when the painter was there, he actually saw him through the window. He went into the house. Laurence turned over his shoulder and looked at him. I think he might have even told Roxanne, he might have said something like, "Shut up, bitch," to Roxanne or something. And she was lying there dying, pleading for help. So before I go on, I do want to say that there's very little reported about Roxanne, which I think is an indictment. Most of the headlines at the time focus on her occupation and seem to compartmentalise her to being less important in the story than Mary. It's not a competition. But I just want us to remember that Roxanne had her life ahead of her, a wonderful partner and 3 beautiful children. Her daughter, Akiana, wrote a letter not long after the death of her mother which read, "I don't think my mum should have died and I just don't understand why. She was a good mum to me and my brothers and a good wife to my father. She did what she had to do for us kids." So I guess I just want us to remember Roxanne as a great mother doing everything she could for her kids. Despite her own difficult upbringing and drug use, she never missed any of her kids' performances at school. She read them bedtime stories and made sure no one went hungry. She was remembered by her partner Tyson Clifford and her children as a loving and gregarious woman who would do anything for anyone. And the thing that really makes me angry is I can assure you that if I were murdered, the press would not headline every bulletin on it as marketing manager killed. But no one seems to have an issue with prostitute or sex worker murdered in big letters on the page. Roxanne was a human being who deserved better. Right. Rant over. When they knocked on the front door, Laurence came out with blood on his chest saying he and his girlfriend had had a bit of a blue. But as the policeman followed him into the house, he saw Roxanne lying on the lounge room floor. On this occasion, Laurence didn't deny killing her. He said something along the lines of, "I didn't do that first one. Yeah, but I did this one." Still holding on to the claptrap version of events that he was the victim and framed for Mary's attack. So he said that he and Roxanne had had dinner and then sex, and then she tried to take his wallet, which incensed him, and he twisted her arm to get it back. He alleged she grabbed a kitchen knife and swung it at him. Now, this kitchen knife was his handy potato peeling knife that he kept in the lounge room for when he was peeling potatoes in front of the TV. Because you do that, don't you? You always leave your handy potato peeling knife in your lounge room. Yeah. In a co-mingling of the lyrics of 2 songs from the musical Chicago, they both reached for the knife, and she ran into his knife. She ran into his knife 7 times. Yes, about as believable as that, he claimed that she was accidentally stabbed 7 times in the tussle. He explained the 7-inch deep cut straight through her liver to her spine by saying that he fell on top of her. So the evidence was pretty damning. The forensics showed the stab wounds were deliberate, the angle of the wounds, the trajectory of the blows, and defensive wounds. She definitely, tried to defend herself. They also established that he'd been in the process of dragging her body out to put in the van when the police arrived. The jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. Now, as we discussed in the Jodi Arias case, there are multiple phases of a court case. At this point, we've completed the trial phase, and I didn't see any evidence of post-trial motions, so it went pretty quickly to penalty phase. And this is where Mary Vincent returns. Mary flew to Florida to testify in the penalty phase of the case to make sure that no one could be labouring under the incorrect belief that Laurence Singleton was anything other than a vicious monster, and also that he should get the death penalty. She was called as the prosecution's only witness in the penalty phase, and I thought this was weird because I wasn't sure whether or not anything in previous cases has any bearing on the current case.
Admissible, yeah.
Particularly after he'd done his time, but anyway, they allowed it, so there you go.
I think probably if part of his defence is that he was innocent of the first crime, maybe that's how they can reintroduce it.
Well, they didn't bring her in terms of the guilty bit, in terms of determining his guilt. They brought her in pretty much to make sure that everyone understood that he should get the death penalty, which I find weird.
No, well, maybe then it's to do with the fact that you keep her out during the guilty phase, but then when you start to go to the penalty phase and go, is there a pattern? Is there other things that are relevant? Maybe because he's already been found guilty, we now go on to this point and she can come and speak.
The other thing that could have some bearing is that he's done this horrible thing before. He's got out. He's killed someone else again. So whether if he didn't get the death penalty, then he needed to get life without parole.
And when you say killed someone else again, you mean for the first time?
Yeah, I know. I mean, a lot of Mary Vincent's life died when he attacked her.
Oh, no, I understand. Just technically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Obviously, she's still terrified to face him.
She's amazing.
Still at this point, very thin. She keeps her head down. It just to get one foot in front of the other is incredibly impressive. But to go have the strength to drag herself in to this situation to see justice done is absolutely extraordinary. I was raped, she told the jury. I had my arms cut off. He used a hatchet. He left me to die. Laurence Singleton was sentenced to the death penalty and spent 3 years on death row until he died from cancer at the age of 74 in 2001.
How old was he when he first raped?
50.
24 years too long.
Mary Vincent has founded the Mary Vincent Foundation to help other survivors of violent crimes and has become a successful artist. She also married a man named Tom Wilson in 1999, who, from what I read about him, was very protective of her. He's a bit older than her. And I think that they looked like quite a good match because he made her feel safe. And at that point in time, it was all about how she'd come out of her shell. She was smiling. Her weight had come, she'd regained weight. She'd had so many, she talks about how there were so many new starts, so many times for her to move on, so many things that she tried to do. And she just have setback after setback. And now she's actually, in 99, from then on, she seemed to kind of get somewhere finally, which is great. And understandably, she stays out of the limelight, preferring to live her life with her family like everyone else. And, yeah, I think they're still married.
So when she's back with her extended family, or are they
her
still
sons.
not?
Her
right.
sons.
Yeah.
And that is the harrowing story of Mary Vincent and Roxanne Hayes and the devastation wrought by one monstrous seaman.
That is a bad pun, Schmidty. That is bad.
He was a merchant seaman.
He's a bad man.
Yeah.
He is. He's heinous.
Sailors don't have a problem with prostitutes, apparently. How's that for a
terrible,
justice?
Mario.
Imagine how many crimes go by
No.
just,
undiscovered.
Maybe less so now than before, but certainly from that period.
It does make you wonder if it attacked others. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
What a scary piece of work. He's
Like,
a
why just on
violent man.
that day he decided to rape her and try and kill her? And the fact that he cut her arms off like he was trying to hide her identity and stuffed her in the culvert and all that sort of stuff. It's like, maybe, I don't know. There was no evidence or anything that linked him to any other cases, but
How'd you find this case?
I heard it on a podcast a long time ago, but also it's popped up once or twice. It's been on my list for a long time, but I wanted to give it, I'll be honest with you, I wanted to give Mary, have Mary's story there, but I spent more time trying to find out more about Roxanne because there isn't much about her at all. And I really don't like the fact that she's sort of almost like an afterthought. She's sort of like, and then he killed a woman and
then he killed a sex worker,
and I said woman because I don't even want to repeat it,
Yeah.
It's just wrong. Anyway, what are your thoughts, guys? Who do you want to sentence? And what fresh hell do you want to rain down on them?
I don't know where to start. There is so much wrong with this case. The fact that Roxanne had to die to get him to die.
Or just get him to jail again. Get him out
seriously punished, right? Yeah, is probably a better thing. Poor Mary. I am. I say poor Mary. My God, amazing Mary. The way that she's managed to survive through all of that is remarkable, and she must be an incredible woman. And I sometimes wonder when we hear stories like this, what if her parents hadn't divorced and she hadn't run away, and she had a nice, solid, supportive upbringing that allowed her to reach her full potential, where would that have gone? And sometimes I guess, victims look back and go, well, because of all of this has allowed me to get to
this is
where I
actually
am.
and that's why I'm so
Yeah.
able to help other people, and here's my purpose, yeah.
Correct. And I think that's the only way that you can look at it. But I don't know,
it's
and
a
then the
tidy
fact,
way, right? It's a tidy way, and it helps us to deal with it, I think, because I think...
And it gives you some gratitude to go, well, how else do you survive it? How else do you actually get past that stuff?
She did say something along at some point about she's grateful for the fact that he didn't kill her. Like, not to him. She's grateful for the circumstance that she survived, and she doesn't want to waste any of the life that she's got, which is great, but I can't even begin to imagine her dark times. The terror that she had, night terrors, literal nightmares. The woman couldn't sleep, she wouldn't go out. It's just awful. And that was for years and years and years. It wasn't
until he's dead, that's going to be with her forever, because he said he will.
She said something about
finish it.
She doesn't feel like any great relief or closure on his death, but she saw the relief in her children's eyes, and that was enough for her. Yeah, because the kids obviously would have still had that hanging over them as well. Yeah.
And there was probably an element of, at least now we can't follow through with what he said he would. So, that in itself is
that threat, I think, that
something nice, but she probably didn't want him dead as such. She doesn't sound like the sort of person who...
No, I don't think she did. In fact,
goes beauty.
In fact, I think I read that she wasn't necessarily pushing for the death penalty, yeah.
But from her perspective, that gives her a sense of relief, I guess, because of that threat where he said he will continue. Yeah, he'll finish the job kind of thing. He's horrid.
Oh, absolutely.
I really struggle with that first act of him, what that would be like to go, imagine, you've been brutally raped and repeatedly over a period of time, and then someone goes, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to chop your arms off.
Oh.
Let's see you survive. I'll give you freedom. I can't even get I can't even speak. But that act of being cognizant while that was going on with one arm and then him doing the other, I actually don't know how she survive that, because we talk about other things. Each situation is very different to the next, and one human body to the next. Certain circumstances. Sometimes if you'd cut somebody, right, they would bleed to death.
Yes,
but she's had
depending on where you get
the fact that she survived that, even before she was able to pack the mud in. She was meant to survive. I'm sure. I have to believe that, because everything was stacked against her and would suggest that was not going to be the case. She was not in a great place. She would have bled out. I can't believe she didn't from those wounds.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
It is unbelievable.
Even that thing of her saying, if I don't continue, this will happen to someone else, as she's getting herself out of that situation, and it happens to someone else anyway. Like, what does she have to do?
And she did. She did a whole lot of lobbying as well that I didn't talk about around trying to change the law. There was something that came up
after
about
that first. After he was to her case. Yeah.
She did a lot of lobbying, and then one of the things that she was trying to get through, can't remember what it was, just died in Congress. There was a bill that she was supporting, she did a lot of that sort of proactive lobbying and advocacy, and, some of it got somewhere and a lot of it didn't. And as a result, Roxanne died.
You said that you think he cut her forearms off so she wouldn't be recognised?
Yeah, which is a bit weird.
Was that written anywhere, or was that just something
in
that...
several places, yeah.
Because it sounds to me more like he did that so that she couldn't climb back out, because if her head's there, the fingerprints or the hands are less relevant.
Quite probably.
Which also is horribly premeditated. Well, was he though? Imagine sitting there going, I'm going to push them down there and there's a chance they'll get out, so I'll chop their forearms off so they don't like that. That's what I'm wondering if he thought.
Why was he trying to hurt her?
I do remember someone, I think he was just trying to hurt her, because I remember someone reading something someone said about him, that his personality or his psychotic traits were such that he just wanted to, sort of abuse women or use them up and then throw them out like garbage. So, and when you think of the way he attacked so blatantly Roxanne in his lounge room in the middle of the day kind of thing, and then was just trying to drag her body out to go dump it somewhere. So I think it was more a case of kill her or maim her, throw her down the ravine and throw her out like rubbish.
There's also that thing of, the woman hating man goes to jail and becomes a model citizen because there's no women around. God, that's a theme, isn't it? That we see way too often.
And no alcohol, right? So one of the other things that appears to have triggered his particularly terrible behaviour and violence was alcoholism. So while he was in jail, of course he seems okay because he doesn't have access to the things that trigger him. Yeah.
It's a lot.
It is a lot, isn't it? It's an awful lot. I'm grateful for the judge who gave the most that he could.
And acknowledge that he would have given
and acknowledge that he would do a whole lot more if he could. I think that's really good. And I think in some ways the legal process didn't let Mary down. I know that probably doesn't sound right, but
it didn't. I mean,
they did the most
process
that they could.
But the sentencing at the time was just disgusting. Back to Carla's outrage about, it doesn't seem to matter how many times you rape someone this way or that way, you just get a year for that, you get a year for that. Yeah.
But what I mean is that
attempted murder by cutting your arms off and you only get 6 years for that. I beg your pardon.
Very
2 years for petty theft. I beg your pardon.
Which bit of that sentence covered the cutting the arms off? Was that the mayhem bit, or was that the attempted murder bit?
The mayhem and kidnapping were in the additional 4 years.
Yeah, because in some ways the cutting of the arms off is worse than the attempted murder because they're kind of linked a little bit. But
hang on. Now you're going to start arguing like his defence team that you're double dipping on the punishments.
Yeah, no, probably
just
the other
roll
way.
it all up together because it's one begets the other.
No, completely the opposite. Where I go, there would be people who are victims of attempted murder who make a more or less full recovery, at least physically. And she's been maimed for the rest of her life significantly to the point where, so many things that she would have been able to do to move on have been taken away from her. Her family, her dancing, all those sorts of things. And he gets 4 years for that.
Yeah.
And he gets I'm not okay with the protection from the mob when she gets nothing. That is...
That's your sentence.
Well, my sentence is, I'm not sure if it's appropriate, but I kind of am a Star Wars fan and I have visions of in episode 2, maybe?
Return of the Jedi, Jabba the Hutt?
No. I'm talking about the early ones. So Star Wars were 4, 5, and 6.
Oh, no, I don't believe
ones.
in the first one. Those other
ones. Yeah, I know. They're not great.
No.
But there's the one where Anakin becomes Darth Vader and he basically has his limbs chopped off.
Yeah.
And he's left on the banks of a larval river kind of thing. And I think that is kind of indicative of what I would like to have happen to Laurence, but I don't want it to, silly as it sounds,
but
I don't want it to be
But he doesn't get to find the Force?
Well, I don't want it to be as clean as what happened to Anakin, right? Because he is then able to make a recovery with a whole lot of, mechanical support and of course the Force, blah, blah, blah. But also the nature of a lightsaber, it cauterizes the wound as it happens so that you don't bleed out. I'd probably be more comfortable with him being on the banks of the larval river and then the angry mob picking him up and throwing him in because I think his punishment needs to ultimately be inflicted by society who just go, remember last week the judge said you are not one of us? I think this is another example of where you are not one of us. I don't care. I don't want to hear it. Nothing you say will redeem you. You don't get credits, mate. All you get is debits.
They were just days from time served already, but yeah.
No, I understand completely. But what I'm saying is that there is nothing good about you. I don't care what filth comes out of your mouth. I'm not falling for any of it. So, yeah, that's probably my sentence for him.
Fair
Swanee?
enough.
Yeah, I want to work in the same territory, although I'm struggling to come up with a punishment per se, but it's around similar themes. I think the thing that sticks with me is after you sort of divorce yourself from the fact that what has physically happened to Mary, it's how he handles it afterwards that really, he just sticks with it. He has no respect for her or women. He sees her as worthless. That what do you expect? What do you expect? That's the way someone like that behaves. That's what you get. So
I'm not the problem.
No, it's like she's worthless. And his inhumane treatment of her because he cannot register a degree of, don't worry about empathy or anything like that. It's this sort of inhumane kind of, well, she's worthless. It doesn't matter what I do to her. And I don't know how to flip that onto him, but it needs to be someone who perhaps wants to be interested in him or care about him or even see him.
I know what you mean, but
do you know what? It's so hard to try and articulate what I mean.
You're looking for a psychological nut punch, but I think with him that he is so disassociated from society.
Yeah.
Like even towards the end when he's living back at home in Florida.
Yeah.
And he's got his lovely house and he's cooking steaks and handing them out to the neighbours and the neighbours' kids are playing with his puppy Rottweiler and everything seems all right. And then he's murdering a person in his lounge room the same day virtually.
Yeah.
There's something not connected with this man. I don't think he has that idea of gaining other people's respect. I don't think he cares. I don't think he feels like that at all. And that's why it's difficult to give him a psychological nut punch. Yeah. So you just have to give him an actual nut punch.
Maybe what he needs is the angry mob following him around for the rest of eternity, right? So it doesn't matter where he goes, he can never, ever settle again. And they don't necessarily have to harm him, but they just have to make sure that his life he'll never be relaxed, he'll never be calm, he'll never think that he can get on with things.
There's nothing that he can do to affect that outcome because they have zero respect or interest in who he is or what he has to offer or whether or not he can have a redemption arc in prison or nothing like that. It's what you are to me is nothing and, we'll treat you as such.
But also he applies for a house to rent or something and the angry mob say, no, you're the murderer, you're the you're the rapist, blah, blah, blah. Whatever he does, he goes out for dinner and the angry mob turn up. Never again can he go back to a life that will be normal.
Yes. It's not deserved.
Maybe?
Yeah, I think it's good.
That's fair.
Schmidty, what did you save up for you?
I didn't actually give it a lot of thought because it was all a bit too horrific. But then we need to talk about Star Wars. I think I'm going to go old school and I think I'll just throw him. I'll go, when Jabba the Hutt's out there and there's this giant crater and there's this big, I don't know what it is, whether it's some alien monster at the bottom or it's just a crater with teeth. Never really understood it. But we'll throw him off into there and let him get eaten and digested by the alien monster because that's where he belongs.
And I think it's slowly that you get digested in that alien monster too.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't. And then there has to be some way of it sustaining his life force so that he just is slowly digested while he's still alive. Yeah.
Well played. 3 good punishments.
Oh, he's a real monster. Yeah. And, back to your point, Swanee, about what else doesn't get reported because he was 50 when he committed that first crime.
I know.
I find it hard
to believe.
Yeah.
That can't be his first time.
I don't.
It's interesting. The other day, we were out with our family for dinner, and I don't know why we're talking about a country or talking about travel. And my sister-in-law was talking to the boys about camping, and she was saying, when I hiked around Europe, and the look on the kids' face, and even me, I had that reaction where now I'm like, oh. And she was smiling and saying how incredible it was because it was right until it wasn't.
Yeah.
This was probably, I'm guessing, the late 80s or something. Never do it now, and kids would never, contemplate different times. But it was.
But people were being murdered then.
Of course.
Yeah, but people were doing it a lot then, and so the proportion.
Exactly.
Yes, everybody was.
It was the time to get murdered.
Yeah.
Now you wouldn't pick up a hitchhike.
That's right.
No, I wouldn't think of it.
Fear that they're going to murder you.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's totally how that sort of whole was turned on its head.
I know that was a bit of a shocker, and yes, I quite purposefully pulled that Band-Aid off real fast.
You did.
But welcome
Wow.
back, Swanee. You managed to get through one episode without taking
my
headset
headphones off. I know.
Headphones off, yeah.
Well done.
Well done.
I think that was only because there was, well,
No time, no warning.
no, you got straight to it. And unlike our, I've forgotten his name, Chikatilo. I mean, that was just, oh my God, one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other.
This one was more Wiggers-like, though, wasn't it, Swanee?
Stop it. You'll all be laughing when you're on the news having to report this, trying to explain how I had a Wiggers trigger and then...
You don't even have to. I'll just play it for them. Here's the audio. We'll sort it out. All right. Well, thank you very much, guys. And as we say every week, I miss you already.
Well done,
Beautiful
Schmidty.
people.
Miss you more. Well done.
Bye, guys.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.